I say it's time we got rid of the public servants in Canberra. Michelle Levine, over to you to address State of the Nation.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Michelle. I'm here to bring some sanity to the morning. I'll try. Okay, as Professor David Flint has just told you, a month ago, just before the Queen's visit, Roy Morgan Research presented Australians' views about the monarchy. And with a clear 55% majority in favour of a monarchy versus a republic at 34%, we said there was no immediate threat to the monarchy. And this is particularly so given for most Australians the monarchy versus republic debate is just not top priority for them. It's not something that people spend a whole lot of time thinking about or worrying about. But we said a crisis could change that situation at any time. Now, the most recent Morgan poll that was done in late October, towards the end of the Queen's visit here, showed support for the monarchy had actually decreased, down 3% to 52%. That's hardly a crisis, a little surprising for many of us, but it's not a crisis. Indeed, if a referendum were held today, the result would be the same as the 1999 Republic referendum. Australia would remain a constitutional monarchy, and by a clear margin. But seriously, apart from the Queen's visit last month, a whole lot of things happened. We've seen the European crisis deepening, with the second bailout of Greece and concerns about Italy. We've seen the beginning of protests in the street and the emergence of a global protest movement. You know, Occupy Wall Street, Occupy Sydney, Occupy Melbourne, Occupy Brisbane, etc. And just last weekend, there were riots or protests marching in the streets of London. We've seen 3 Australian soldiers killed in Afghanistan, and that created a massive turnaround in public opinion. 72% now favour the withdrawal of Australian troops, up from 40% in May. May of this year, the majority were actually saying leave the troops where they are. Iron ore prices have slumped, 30% down for iron ore since August, and prices for other metals are coming down. And we've seen, related to that, we've seen the whole issue of states' rights now becoming a debate that's heating up, surrounding things like the mining tax and coal seam gas. The Reserve Bank recently cut interest rates for the first time in more than 2 years. Some people think that's a really good sign because it helps with their mortgage. Others see that it's a sign that the Reserve Bank realises that Australia is not in really good shape. And we've seen very serious industrial disputes with the Qantas grounding of all planes. Thousands of stranded travellers and many, many millions or billions of dollars in compensation costs. Now, Australians were divided on who to blame for the Qantas grounding of planes. 56% blamed Qantas management and 42% blamed the unions. But 64%, a clear majority at 64%, said the government should have stepped in earlier. And in the last month, we've seen a major increase in unemployment. Last Thursday, the monthly Roy Morgan Unemployment Survey reported a substantial increase in October unemployment, up 0.9, almost 1%, to 8.6%. That's huge. Most economy watchers, people like Robert Gottliebsen, have been calling us and saying, look, why isn't unemployment going up? All of the indications are that it should be going up, yet it was holding. But this month it's actually gone up. And of course the RBA was right when they said just last week that unemployment must go up. We actually think that unemployment was probably held back because you had all of the people actually going off, sort of helping with the floods and helping people out in that area, and also the last parts of the global financial crisis bailout was actually creating a lot of employment and engagement for people, but it really seems to have hit right now with a big unemployment figure. Yet, despite all of these really worrying things in the last month, and they've obviously been brewing for a while, the Australian consumer confidence remains high and continues to rise. Roy Morgan Consumer Confidence Rating is now 116.8, up 2.1% in a week, and that's the 4th successive rise. We just keep getting more confident, we just keep getting more optimistic. And government confidence, or confidence in the government, has risen to 105.5. That's up 3.5% in a week. And support for the ALP government is increasing. The latest Morgan, I heard somebody nearly faint there. Look after this lady. The latest telephone Morgan poll conducted on November 2 and 3 reports the ALP at 48.5% to the LNP 51.5. So LNP is still ahead, but this is a substantial coming back of the Labor Party. Interesting, isn't it? Well, I guess it's welcome to our world of public opinion polling, where you actually hear what people think, you hear what seem like quite inconsistent views, and you try and make sense of it. And we, along with a whole bunch of other people, economists, politicians, and people who generally watch the world, believe that how people perceive events and situations is actually in many ways more important than the events and the situations themselves. So let's see how Australians are perceiving all of the events that are going on in the world and in Australia. Since about 2005, Roy Morgan Research has asked Australians what they see as the most important issues or problems facing the world and the most important issues or problems facing Australia. Now, the questions are open-ended. We just say, what's the most important issue facing the world? And we let people answer in their own words whatever they want to say. And then we kind of group the like answers and count them so that we can actually pick up any new issues and we can quantify how big and important those issues are and as they grow in importance and fade away. In 2005, now let me just see if I can make my pointer work. In 2005, over here, we actually saw that the biggest issue was terrorism and border security, all of those issues that were top of mind in 2005. Now, remember, of course, when we were surveying, we couldn't see the rest of that chart. We didn't know what the future would hold. All we knew was that the biggest issue facing the world and Australia, according to Australians, was border security and concerns about boat people and terrorism and all of those sorts of things. By mid-2008, the biggest issue was the environment, climate change, water. And truly, I thought that, like the women's movement, the environmental movement was unstoppable. It just seemed that everything to do with the environment, like motherhood, was a really strong positive. It was hard to see that it would ever change. But by mid-2008, by the late 2008, with the global financial crisis, economic issues obviously became really crucial to the population. And in May 2009, 50% of the Australian population considered the economy and economic issues to be the biggest problem facing the world. As the first panic after the global financial crisis started to sort of fade away, we saw concerns about economic issues fade away. If you do these polls long enough, you realise that people can't worry about everything all the time. And probably that's a good thing. We tend to worry about one thing and then it fades away and another issue takes priority in our minds and the mind of a nation. So what we saw is the global financial concerns fading away, and we saw the environment starting to come back as an issue, and terrorism and war and conflict coming back into people's minds as an issue. Today, with data collected in late October, just before Qantas grounded its hold fleet, we see a clear return to concerns about the economy on a global basis. Not like that major panic that we saw when we had the global financial crisis first hit and we all went, what on earth is that about? But today, 45% of Australians believe the most important issue facing the world is the economy, well ahead of environmental issues at 24% and terrorism and war at 6%. But what about for Australia? When it comes to Australia, the most important issue, the data shows, is that concern about the economy has come off the boil. A little bit less worried about the economy, despite all the things we've just been talking about. Only 33% now see the economy and all things economic as the biggest issues facing Australia. That's down 4% since July. The decrease there is driven predominantly by concern about the carbon tax falling away. So we've only got now 5% of people specifically saying the carbon tax is the biggest issue facing Australia. 4% of them are against the carbon tax and 1% are for the carbon tax. That's down from 12%. So the big concern about the carbon tax relating to the economy has now fallen away, so we're less concerned about economic issues.